Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about all the books I've read and the movies I've watched during the previous month of March. Now, I already did a video on this, or I already filmed a video like a couple of days before, but it got corrupted. It was 35 minutes, so I'll try to do this again, and I hope it's not as long, so I won't waste your time. So, just before I start, the feature on Letterbox where when you go to a person's profile, it would display their top four films on the top of their profile. So that's sort of the idea that I'll revolve around the books and the movies that I've consumed. So I'll talk about all the books I've read and movies I've watched, and I'll exclude the top four that I've read and watched since I'll talk about them last. So first, let's do this now. So I've read 10 books, and about movies, I've watched a lot. I've watched around 25 to 30 movies. I forgot the exact number. So, let's start moving on to books. The first book I read, excluding the top four book I read, we have Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. Nothing to See Here is a sort of sci-fi literary book about a housekeeper who babysits two children and finds out that the two children can spontaneously combust and burst in flames out of nowhere. And it's a sci-fi concept. It's a ridiculous concept, but that's where the story takes off. And it's definitely a humorous story. It's a very blackish comedy, but it's more on the funny, humoristic story than the sort of satiric political story. And yeah, I really liked it. I don't know exactly why I picked this up since humor is not exactly my favorite genre in terms of literature, actually both literature and film, but I really enjoyed this. I had a knack out of it, and it's something that I enjoyed while passing time, something to laugh about while reading. Next we have Trick Mirror by Gia Tolentino. I have a copy. Trick Mirror. Now, this is a non-fiction work about reflections on self-delusion. I think Gia Tolentino's actually half Filipino, half American, but I'm not sure. But I think she's Filipino. And it's basically about it's like a couple of essays about anecdotes surrounding her life and sort of how she views different political issues, how she views how the internet has shaped us as human beings, and she also talks about different stories in her life that's just worth sharing or that's interesting. And all of these stories are linked with a thread of a feministic kind of perspective, so it's a very feminist work. And yeah, I liked it. I didn't gain as much as I would have wanted to, since a lot of people really love reading that book, and it's one of Barack Obama's like top books in his 2018 list, I believe. But it didn't leave much of an impact on me after reading it. But I really do enjoy it, and I recommend it. Next we have The Five by Hallie Rubenfield. I read this on my Kindle. It's a non-fiction crime book, which is supposedly supposed to be about the lives of the five women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. So it's not about Jack the Ripper, and it's not about how they were killed by Jack the Ripper, but it's about supposedly about their lives and their different personalities and the lives they were living, so that we could give them a voice or a character. But I actually found the novel to do quite the opposite, since it felt like it focused more on the events leading to their deaths rather than their lives itself. I mean, yeah, maybe them being killed in that specific manner, or maybe them revolving around dangerous issues such as this, is a huge part of their lives. But I felt like it didn't give much flavor or like personality to their character, and it's not. I felt like I would have wanted something more substantial in terms of the lives these women truly lived. And yeah, I kind of hated this book, so I apologize for that. Next, we have Matka by Karen Tidbeck. Karen Tidbeck's a Swedish author, and Matka's a science fiction novel. It's basically about uh, a dystopian world or another world, in which the world is divided into separate colonies based on the type of sector they live in. For example, there's an industrial sector and etc. And our main character is a researcher, and she decides to go to this certain colony, the agricultural sector, to do a bit of research there for the government. But then, as soon as she goes into the colony, a few days into her stay, she finds out that things are not quite what they seem, and the story takes off from there. And I actually was really enjoying this book at the start since it was sort of intriguing, but I felt like it didn't really propel that much its ideas to the reader, and in the end, it felt sort of half baked and undercooked. And there were quite a lot of existential themes here in terms of identity and how we perceive others and etc., and the masks and the facades that we would put on. But I don't think it was explored exactly very well. It felt like the book had a lot of ideas worth exploring, but they're just hanging at loose straws or loose threads, and they're trying to grasp at something, but it didn't really cling or hold on to something that much. And yeah, that's my thoughts. It was okay. It was okay. I didn't exactly like it, but I didn't hate it as much either. Next, we have Uncanny Valley, which is a memoir by Anna Wiener, who basically talks about her work in Silicon Valley and her experience of being a minority as a female in the Silicon Valley, since it's a largely tech bro patriarchal society filled with men. And it was interesting to read it from her perspective, but I felt like a lot of it stemmed from her complaining. And yeah, I mean, it's right in a way since it gives her a voice, but I felt like it would have been better, or it would have had more impact if she explored more on the hierarchy and why the hierarchy is structured in that way, why the social and work hierarchy is domineered and dominated by men who work at the top. And I feel like that would have made her, being say the only woman in the group or in the workforce, have a much more stronger impact and a stronger voice compared to how she actually portrayed it in her memoir. And of course, it's a memoir, I can judge, but I felt like things would have been more powerful if written in a different way. So those were my thoughts. And last book I've read before the top four favorites, we have Focus by Daniel Goleman. And from the title itself, The Hidden Driver of Excellence, it's self-explanatory. It's about focus, why we focus, how to have better focus, how to become more productive, etc. And it was okay. I listened to this on Scribe, and it's mostly self-explanatory stuff I've mostly heard on before. I really like the part where the author talked about some of the anecdotes and some of the biographies, and especially during the pianists' lives and how they apply, sort of 10,000 hour principle. 10,000 hour rule basically means you need to work on something for 10,000 hours in order to become a world class or to become an expert at that certain skill or practice. And yeah, I liked it, but I felt like I would have wanted more, honestly. I would have wanted a deeper and sort of more substantial, meaningful exploration, since a lot of this, it's already common baseline knowledge, and I feel like everyone knows it already, and I just wanted something deeper, something that would make me reflect and look back on my work ethic, but it didn't really do that for me. So, yeah. Okay, moving on to the top four. Now, I'll do this in order since I like ranking stuff. In fourth place, we have The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. Now, this book was actually, it's a Japanese book. It was actually nominated recently for the shortlist of the International Man Booker Prize, and I can definitely see why I'm rooting for this book. It takes a very interesting premise. So, in this sort of far off far off dystopian world, sometime in the future, it doesn't really give, a background or context to all of this. It's set up in this island where the people are living their daily lives, and one day or in a couple of days, things just start randomly disappearing. And when things disappear, people will forget about them. And it's just spontaneous. Like, things just disappear, people will move on as more things disappear. And the job of the memory police is to ensure that the things that stay hidden or disappeared will not be known again or will not be manifest again. They will ensure that the things that are gone will always be gone forever. And it might sound like a very scientific, it might sound like a very action heavy, narrative, plot filled premise, but it actually isn't. It has a very philosophical and psychological sort of musing on these characters. It's more of a character study, and I really like the themes on how the book portrayed the stuff we cherish and how we only cherish or miss something once that thing is gone. So that was heartrending in a way. And yeah, it's very existential. The ending was very poignant. It's not the type of book wherein a lot happens in it, technically, plot wise, but it makes you think a lot about the things that you have right now. And it definitely makes you thankful, and it makes you appreciate the things you have right now more. It's very enigmatic, but I highly recommend it. It's a very short book. So that's fourth. Third, we have The Plague by Albert Camus. I have it. The Plague. Now, I bought this book years ago since I wanted to get to Camus, but I never had the chance to read it. And now considering, the season, I think it's appropriate to read it. And yeah, I love this book. And it was just actually strange because I thought this would be a super difficult book. When I was starting this book out, since it's a classic, I had my Spark notes ready, I had my notes ready, I had my dictionary ready, but it actually flowed easily. Actually read like a modern day novel, and I guess it's timeless in that way. But it's not just timeless in that way. It's not just timeless in the writing style, but it's also timeless in its themes. So obviously, The Plague. Albert Camus is a French existentialist author known for his very philosophical works, and The Plague is obviously about a town getting hit by this pandemic. And what struck me the most here was that how he focused on how the plague affects the people more than the plague itself. It talks about how the plague has disrupted their daily lives, and I really liked seeing how we're given a different cast of characters, and in the beginning they all have their different goals and different professions, but as it geared towards the end, it sort of shifted more into a collective goal as they realized that in the face of death, we human beings, we are all the same. We are all facing the same problem, and it will make you question how you live your life. It will make you question the meaning we put into our life and in our work and into the people we love. And it will make you question how you want or how you would want to spend your time, given that there's a certain deadline or there's a certain date where you can just die. And this death is not necessarily a significant death. It may be the most random and meaningless death. And even though your death may be the most random and meaningless, it's going to make you question, oh, if my death is this meaningless, does that make my life meaningless? I'm putting so much meaning into the things that I do. And if I just die, how will I get the meaning from my life? And that's a very absurdist concept, and he explores it very, very, very well. Very in-depth, it's very thorough. And it actually left me the ending was actually very hopeful, but it actually left me kind of sad in a way, because it made me think a lot about how I live my life now. So yes, The Plague, it's still resonant, the way it talks about its moral values and ethical and humanistic concepts. And yes, I love this book. Second, we have The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli. I think he is a physicist, forgive me if I'm wrong. Order of Time nonfiction book, basically about time. He talks about the history of time, what time is, how humans conceive time, how time applies in the physical sciences, etc. And I really enjoyed this because I felt like he did a good job of bringing so much information about this very debated and multifaceted topic in this very tightly compacted single volume. It's only around 200 pages, but the amount of information and knowledge on that 200 pages is so vast, and it made me think a lot of how we conceive time. What struck me the most here, there was a concept wherein he talked about how time doesn't exist since time is relative. It's a physics concept. And the past, the present, and the future does not exist. And we should view life not as a timeline, not as a chronology of events, but rather as a system of events sort of interlinked with one another, wherein they are all connected and they don't necessarily happen from a point A to point B. And that will make you question, just like the plague, you know, how you live your life. And the book was thought provoking in that aspect. And it's one of those books that gave me an existential crisis since, of course, it's about time. Time is gold. Our lives revolve around time. So, Carlo Rovelli talking about time and basically turning the tables around and shifting our focus to the concept of what if the most important thing in our lives doesn't actually exist. Yeah, I love that. Now, my favorite book, I have no idea how long this video will be. But my favorite book of March was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This is a brilliant book. I love this book so much. I wasn't even expecting a lot from this. I just looked at my shelf, picked up a unread book, and I was like, oh, this looks short and sweet and simple, and I'm gonna read it. I didn't even know who Trevor Noah was prior to reading this, but after reading it, I'm super excited to check out more of his stuff. This guy is a genius. He's actually a stand-up comedian. Now, Born a Crime, it's a memoir about his life and growing up living as a South African from childhood. And he talks about how apartheid and how racism has affected his perspective on life and how he views, sort of westernized societies and, the sort of chauvinist and patriotic perspective that comes along with all that. And this might sound like a very sad book. And it is a sad book. But it's also very funny. And that's where that's where he gets all his admiration from me. He has the perfect ability to lyrically balance the dark and the light with such elegant, poignant writing that it's so affecting. He has the ability to not be very verbose with his words. It's a very short book, but even though he uses relatively very simple language, the message that he comes across through in his work, it's so striking and it's so hard hitting. And it affected me a lot, especially when he talks about his relationship with his mom, since the book is sort of like the crucifix of, you know, how he dealt with his relationship with his mother. And it was very heartfelt, it was very heart rendering. And it made me actually tear up a bit, like it made me cry a bit during the end. And, apart from that, it's a book that I can relate to so much, when he talks about his life growing up, when he talks about his perspective on religion, and this is the base of religion with his mom, when he talks about his first love, when he talks about the period of his life when he'd gone through horrible acne. That was very relatable. And it's sort of a book that I love and something that I related to, and it's something that I'll definitely cherish and reread from years to come. And this guy deserves all my respect. He gets all my respect. And I want to see this guy do more literature, and I want to see him write more since he has a very great talent for writing. So that's my favorite book of March. Now, moving on to the movies. This is going to be a very long video. I apologize. Okay, same concept, movies. I'll go through everything I watched except for the top 4. I'll leave those for the last. First, I'm Not Your Negril. I'm gonna go through this quickly. I'm Not Your Negril, obviously a documentary about racism. I liked it, didn't get much out from it. Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders. It is something I'll think about and something I need to rewatch, so I won't talk about it for now. Next, we have Onward, the latest Disney Pixar film. Actually, the last film I saw in the cinema before COVID hit. And I really liked it. It was very touching. I liked how it took the fantasy aspect and made it something that both children and adults can enjoy at the same time. And it's definitely a fun time at the cinema. Contagion, obviously, because of the COVID. I've never really gravitated towards Steven Soderbergh's works, but I really like Contagion. It is actually a very prophetic film. It was released in 2011, but a lot of the things that happen in Contagion ring true to how a lot of things right now are happening because of COVID. And it really captures the grittiness, not just the grittiness of the pandemic, but the humanity and the heart that we get from working as one and the resilience that stems out from that. Next, we have the host, Bong Joon-ho. I didn't like it. I'm so sorry. I thought it was very cheap. And the effects were... Yeah, and I'm gonna give this another chance. But considering that I love his other works, Parasite, Snowpiercer, Okja, but the host didn't really work for me. It felt very traditional, both as a narrative and in the themes that it wanted to tell. So that's that. Stray Dogs, another popular film in terms of the high art genre. This was directed by Chai Ling Miang, I think. And I didn't like this movie at all. It focuses on lingering its camera on these certain characters, and I didn't get much out of that at all. I'm a proponent of slow cinema. Lab Diaz is my favorite Filipino filmmaker, but I felt like this didn't have a lot to convey at all in terms of themes, and I'm pretty sure there is a lot that it wanted to tell, considering that it had a huge cult status and a lot of people really loved it. But for me personally, I didn't get anything out from it, and the experience felt more tedious than something worth cherishing for me. And yeah, I apologize. I didn't like that as well. We have Skin. This won the best short for Oscars about 2 years ago, and I can see why people hate this. I personally didn't hate it, but I didn't really like it as well. The way it dealt with racism was very hard hitting. All of the nuance or subtlety was thrown out of the window, and it dealt with the topic of racism in a very black and white manner. It was very yin and yang. It didn't really delve into more of the complexities of how racism works both politically and socially. And, you know, it's just something that it's more of something like a win or a lose film. It's like either the blacks or the whites will win. Sort of like that. It's sort of like a negative sum game or positive sum game. It's not a zero sum game. No joke, it's a zero sum game since since one will lose and one will win. But yeah, that's my main problem with it. It's more, the topic of racism, the topic of discrimination, the topic of gender equality. It's more complex than that. And the way this film deals with it, it's very black and white, and I didn't like it at all. I rewatched Personal Shopper. I love that film, one of my favorites. I talked about it in my favorites of the decade video. And since I was in the kick or in the mood for an Olivier Assayas film, I also watched Irma Vep, which was about it was just about the film, about filmmaking, wherein a filmmaker remakes the popular French movie back then, about vampires. And I really enjoyed this. I think it's a good commentary on not just French cinema, not just cinema in general, but also French society and how they perceive films. And of course, it's about the art of filmmaking, the art of making movies. And that I love films about films, so I definitely recommend that. We have Swallow. It's about a woman who likes swallowing needles and pins and random objects. And I thought this was a horror film, but it went more into the psychological drama aspect. And honestly, not gonna lie, I don't think the metaphors worked really well for this film. I felt it was kind of obnoxious, and a lot of the film lost its steam after the first half, and it didn't really stick with me after, and it left a bad taste in my mouth. So that's what I have to say. We have Honey Boy, one of the few films in 2019 that I missed. I love this movie. I love Noah Jupe's performance. I love Harrell's direction. I watched an interview wherein Harrell states that she likes her films to be 90 minutes long, since she felt like all the themes and the story that the filmmakers wanted to tell can be fit in that time frame without becoming very verbose or overly bombastic with how it wanted to tell the story. Doesn't meander too much. There are no red herrings. This is very straight, direct. It's very hard hitting, and it talks about very serious issues about the relationship between the father and the son, and alcohol issues, and working in the movie industry, and how sort of fame affects. Fame is sort of the perspective, the spotlight among all of these different issues, and I found it a very affecting film. And it's actually loosely based on Shia LaBeouf's life, so big respect for that guy, considering he also wrote the screenplay and he also acted as his dad, channeling that inner energy. That was a brilliant move, and I highly respect and admire LaBeouf for that. 45 Years, one of the few films of the decade that I miss. I love this movie. It's about a couple whose marriage slowly disintegrates as the wife finds out that the husband might not love her. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, it sort of examines how love is formed, and the facades and the masks that we put on, and makes us question the performances we put on other people, makes us question which is truth, which is performance. And it really made me question how many people love me, and that's very existential. So yeah, made me very sad actually. We have Night of the Hunter and The Innocents, two classics that I did not like at all. I might do a review on this and I'll explain more on it, so I won't talk about it now. But baseline, bottom line, they are highly acclaimed and I did not like them at all, so I apologize. Okay, since I didn't like those two, I decided to rewatch Raw two times. I love Raw, one of my all-time favorite films. I did a review on it on this channel if you want. Same thing with Detour, one of my favorite noir films, and I did a review on it on this channel. I rewatched those two solely because I needed notes for my reviews, and I highly recommend those two. And I watched Touch of Evil by Orson Welles, something I need to rewatch since it's the film I didn't get. It's a film that a lot of audiences love, but it didn't appeal to me as a film noir, and it felt I don't know. It's not something that stuck with me, but I need to rewatch it because it's Orson Welles, the god of cinema. So I need to rewatch that. I need to watch Citizen Kane first, but you know. Reviews are not absolute, opinions are not absolute. I'm gonna love Touch of Evil soon, hopefully. I'm just gonna rewatch it. I rewatched Birth, which is for me the best film from Jonathan Glazer. I truly think he is a successor to Kubrick. And the way he uses the shots and the classical music, and he paid a lot of homage to The Shining and Barry Lyndon in Birth actually. Same with Under the Skin, he had a lot of homage to Kubrick's other films. And Birth is one of the films with the most interesting concepts that I've read or seen, because it's basically about a, a woman whose husband dies, and 10 years later, a small 10-year-old child comes to her claiming that he is her husband reincarnated. And that's such a ridiculous concept. But it's such an interesting concept as well. It's a type of concept that when I read that concept, I think, oh, I want to watch that film right now. And yeah, it works on that concept really well. It makes you question sort of the mystery and the enigma surrounding that concept up until the very last frame. Makes you question, is this kid bluffing or not? Or is this kid really, really her husband? Is he using some voodoo magic or something? And yeah, it's a very interesting concept, and the way Glazer uses his themes here, very good, and I highly recommend it. Highly recommend Birth. Next, we have The Hunt. I hated it. Obviously, it's one of the most obnoxious films I've ever seen. It injected a lot of its politics and themes into its dialogue, and it sort of had to spell everything out for the viewer. It's like, oh, this is a film about racism. This is a film about politics. This is a film about society in general. We live in a society, and I found it very annoying, very obnoxious. I hated this film so much. I don't want to talk about it anymore. So moving on, we have Opening Night from John Cassavetes, about alcoholism and about an old actress who sort of regrets about her youth and the opportunities that she missed when she was younger. I liked it. Cassavetes is not a director that I exactly love, but more of I appreciate his works. And yes, I've seen A Woman Under the Influence and Opening Night. I can't wait to see more from him. So after Opening Night, I made a Muji account. I watched a couple of short films. I won't explain them more, but I watched Little Hands, Toyland, and I also watched A Sun-Tried Myth from the Bakumatsu era, which I didn't like actually. It's a Japanese comedy. It had a lot of praise and reverence, and it's considered as one of the best Japanese comedies of all time. But for me, I'm not into. I don't think I'm into Japanese comedy. It's same way with anime. I'm not into. I like some anime, but most of the anime I'm not into. I don't like the way it portrays the characters' expressions, and I found the humor very lackluster. And everything being so overemphasized and very over the top and very outlandish, it felt very very cartoonish for me, and it's not exactly my style. I can see why a lot of people would love it, but it's not something that I jived with, so I apologize for that. Now, last film I watched, excluding the favorites, So Long My Son, another one of the highly praised films. It premiered in Bernila, Bernali. It premiered in Bernali last year, and it's 3 hours. It basically examines a family and as they live through 3 generations of their lives, the Chinese family. And I like this. It didn't really connect with me. It reminded me a lot of Edward Yang's work, E, A Brighter Summer Day. Not just in the length, but how it examines its characters and their fragmented psyches. And I liked it. That's all I have to say. I liked it. I didn't emotionally connect with it. Okay, now moving on. Let's do this. This is such a long video. Favorites. Now, fourth, we have The Invisible Man by Leigh Whannell. Don't at me at this. I love this movie. So, it's adapted from the novel by H.G. Wells, The Invisible Man, but it's more of a sci-fi novel. And Leigh Whannell, coming from his other film, Upgrade, which is a sci-fi film, he takes The Invisible Man. He removes the sci-fi concept. I mean, there's the sci-fi concept still there, but he focuses more on the horror aspect and brings it into present day situation. Sort of a what if this situation in this novel would happen today, but in a more horrific and gruesome manner. And I really love this. I really love this film. The dialogue, some of the script is a bit clunky, and the score can be overbearing at times, but the performances are so good, so strong. Elizabeth Moss is so good in this film, and the way Leigh Whannell deals with the horror genre, I really like his use of negative space and his ability to make the viewers stare into nothing and make us question, the sort of little details behind the background makes us question, where is the Invisible Man? Is he here somewhere? Is he there? Is he hiding? And it makes you active with the film, which I really love. And there's this one scene in the middle. I'm not gonna talk about this, but if you've seen this film, you know this scene. There's one scene in the middle, made me gasp out loud at the cinema. That hadn't happened in a long time, and since that happened, it made me say, what the fuck, out of nowhere. Since that happened, I had to include it in my top 4 favorites of the month. And go see it if you haven't. It's on VOD, you can download it. Now, that's from fourth, Invisible Man. And third, we have Un Chien Andalou, which is directed by Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali, the painter. It's a very experimentalist short film about dreams. So I'm gonna do a review on this. So I won't talk about it much here, but I really like it. It's a very surreal film, and I definitely see why David Lynch would get a lot of inspiration and homage from this. So highly recommend it. It's on YouTube, so you can just watch it there. I recommend if you want something trippy and something that will make you go wow. Okay, in second place, we have Morvern Callar by Lynn Ramsey. I love Lynn Ramsey as a director. She's one of my favorite female directors. She's known for her films having a non-linear storyline and her focusing on the broken pieces of a character's behavior and personality, and her examining these broken pieces and events in a non-linear style. And it's more of a character study. Her films tend to be plotless. It's not a film strong narrative-wise, but in terms of understanding a character and their desires and their motivations or why they have done something, it's so in-depth. It's very introspective. It also makes me question things in a certain way. And in Morvern Callar, it sort of examines, a woman grieving after her boyfriend dies or commits suicide. And yeah, it's very hard-hitting. It's a very sad film, but it's also a very interesting character drama about the explorations, about the relationships we have with the people we love. So I highly recommend that. And I want Lynn Ramsey to make more films. She only had a few films in her filmography, and I've seen all of her full-length films, so I need to see more of her. I want to see more of her stuff. Now, my favorite film of March is Indie Song. I watched this on Mubi, and I wasn't actually familiar with this film. All I know is that it's a French film, and that it has a lot of good reviews. Now, it's from Marguerite Duras. I don't know much about her. This is my first film from her, but I do know that she's known for her very indie high art films, very populated by character voiceovers and unnamed characters. And I know she wrote a novel, Lamont, and it won a lot of awards, so I definitely want to read that. Now, Indie Song is basically about a woman who lives in India because her husband is a sort of political ambassador there. and it sort of examines her day-to-day life and her relationships, her illicit affairs with other men, and it examines her tedious existence in a way. And I really love this film. I really love its focus on mirrors. There were a lot of shots of mirrors throughout the film, and I love how it basically says that mirrors are not reflections to our soul. As much as we want to try to dress ourselves up, as much as we try to conceal ourselves with this beauty, we will always, there will always be this scar that we cannot conceal. There will always be this certain hurt or certain pain that we cannot hide, and that in the end we have to face with or deal with. And that's basically the film. It's a type of film that loves to present itself in a very beautiful manner, both in the shots, in the cinematography. But behind all of these beautiful images and beautiful cinematography, there is this underlying pain that is sort of emanating from underneath, and it's sort of boiling underneath the main character and all the other characters. And it's sad in a way. There's also this very brilliant, very beautiful piano song, very beautiful piano indie song playing throughout the film. It's sort of like the theme for the wife and her husband, and as it plays throughout the film, it reminds you of the melancholy. It's a very sad film. It's a very melancholic film, but it makes us examine the performances we have, the performances we put on, and how we shouldn't run away from our troubles in life. How we should face all our problems. And yes, I love that movie. It's one of my favorites. It's my favorite this month, and I really got a lot out from it. So I highly recommend it. Now, yeah, those were all the stuff I saw in March. Both books and movies. So this is a very long video and I apologize. Now, before I end, I just want to go through quickly. This is going to be very fast. I won't explain at all, but I just want to go through very quickly the books I want to read in April. Sort of future plans. Books I want to read in April and movies in April. But I don't have a list of movies planned, so I'll talk about the shows I want to watch in April. Okay, now April. Fiction. I want to read The Bone Clocks, David Mitchell. I'm currently reading that. We have The Chestnut Man by Soren Svistrop. I wanted to read a thriller. It's been a long time since I read a mystery thriller. We have 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I've read Love in the Time of Cholera in February. I really love that. We have The Overstory by Richard Powers, nominated for the Man Booker a couple of years ago. We have Severance by Ling Ma. I heard it's a very apocalyptic novel, so I'm in, I guess. Non-fiction, The Better Angels for Nature, Why Violence Has Declined by Steven Pinker. I'm currently listening to that on Scribed. I'm liking it so far. There's a lot of statistical data, but he has a lot of interesting points in that. You have In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, another popular crime non-fiction that I want to read. The Personal NBA, Master the Art of Business by Geoff Kaufman. My dad gave this book to me, so my dad loves it. I should love it as well. We have Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, from the creator of Nike. It's his memoir. I'm not into shoes or anything, but I'm really interested in this guy and his life story, so I want to read that. We have My Struggle by Karl Ove Knausgaard. I want to read at least the first 3 books. It's a six epic opus about his life and his struggles as a human being, and I want to read about that. So I want to read at least the first 3 books, but if I only read 1 book, I'd understand. I just want to start the series. It's been sitting on my shelf for so long. In terms of manga, I want to read manga and graphic novels. We have Mouse by Art Spiegelman, Tomi by Junji Ito. I've read No Longer Human back in January. I loved it. It has been ingrained. Some of the images has been ingrained and burned on my mind forever. So I want to read this other stuff. We have Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. I really want to watch the show, so I'm going to read the graphic novel first. In terms of movies, I don't have movies planned, but in terms of shows, I really want to watch Twin Peaks. I really want to watch all 3 seasons. If I still have time, I might start BoJack Horseman and Cowboy Bebop, but the main priority is Twin Peaks. I really need to watch that. So yeah, that's all I have that's my plans for April, and that's my wrap up for March, books and movies. I apologize, this is such a long video. I bet it's over 30 minutes again, but yeah, thank you if you made it up to the end. Thank you for watching. I'll definitely do a monthly wrap up like this. So thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want to, and see you next time.